Akhetaten's Gates, Chapter 2. I lay in my bed late the next day. I couldn't shake the feeling I had received the night before. Amenhotep IV was a very different individual. He was something so new and almost exotic in a world where everything was seemingly just so. Everything had to be a certain way, and this boy disrupted that idea in my mind. I could hear my parents having their breakfast. They, actually, were most likely finished and just lounging in the cool shade of the house as it became hot outside. But this was the norm. I looked aside to see my sister, Leah, was absent. She was likely already with them. I'm not so sure what she had found so interesting at the party last night, but I would likely hear all about it once I saw her. But in order to do so, it was for certain I had to get out of bed. So up I got, scratching my side. I felt more natural now without having to wear that stupid dress. I wiped my eyes and stretched, finally getting to my feet and patting myself into the dining area. My father was sitting, somewhat reclined, in his old chair. He was the only one seated. Apparently everyone else had gotten up. He smiled at me once he saw me. "So, you finally decided to get up today? I suppose I don't blame you for sleeping in. Last night was a pretty successful night." "A total success, my mother cheered as she came out and set down a small plate of food for me. Leah sprang seemingly out of nowhere behind her and rushed to me, bouncing as she held onto my arms. "Daddy says you met a prince last night." Her reply from me was merely a smile. Daddy introduced me to the older prince, Tutmose. He was really nice. So regal. His Majesty Amenhotep and Prince Tutmose were really impressed with me. Pharaoh and Daddy were discussing me marrying Tutmose when I grew up. Me! I could be a queen of Egypt! Again, I said nothing. But this time, it was because of this sickening feeling in the pit of my stomach. It surprised me, really. Was I jealous? Why did Father put so much fuss and effort into Leah? Why was Leah so special as to be betrothed to Prince Tutmose? Elder siblings, who needs them? I suppose I should have been happy for her. But to imagine my sister as a queen? It was just too hard to believe. And what would I be then? I'd still be plain old Nefertiti. What would happen to Amenhotep IV? He'd still be plain ordinary Amenhotep. Life wasn't fair sometimes. Age. Humph. It was nothing but lucky timing was all. "We should celebrate," my father said, snapping me out of my bitter thoughts. I glanced at him as he stretched. He brushed the crumbs from his kilt and stood, putting on his sandals and looking the three of us over. "Why don't we go swimming? We can have lunch on the bank of the river." If there was one thing Leah loved, it was a picnic on the river's edge. Yes, the thing that Leah loved. But again, I suppose I couldn't blame the decision. After all, it was she, not I, who was betrothed to royalty. It was her day of celebration. But, in favor of the decision, on a hot day like today, what child in their right mind would refuse a cool swimming trip in the refreshing Nile waters? But little did I realize that day would be the beginning of a whole new adventure, starring me as the heroine. Little insignificant me was about to get a taste of what it was like to be the firstborn. The waterfowl helped themselves to the abundance of fish and other delicious foods in the Nile's cool relief. The water was calm and serene, glimmering in the hot sun. Aside from birds, there were fish leaping from the water, causing disruption on the calm with ripples. A few other animals could be seen on some of the further banks and down a ways from where we were. Mostly the animals closest to us were domestic stray pets, trying to escape the heat and quench their thirst, much the same as we were. We rested in the shade, enjoying the lush greenery. This was the fruit of the Delta region. Shade, cool breezes that were all but figments of imagination, and the more inland they flew, were catered to us freely. There was an abundance of life of all sorts. This may not have been Luxor, the center of the Egyptian world, but this was the Delta, the realm of the goddess of the home, Bastet, and a virtual paradise. Our parents were quite content to merely watch everything. Leah and I were quickly bored just sitting and watching, so off we went to the river's bank, splashing into the shallows and sitting, slopping mud together. We weren't really sure what we were trying to make with it, but it was fun nevertheless. My father soon grew restless and began to walk up and down the banks a short way, keeping his eye on my mother and us. My mother, curious at our antics, finally came to kneel beside my sister. "What have you got there?" "Mama, it's a crocodile," she stated, as though the glop was the most obvious crocodile to be seen. Mother merely nodded and smiled, agreeing silently. I had to hand it to my mother. She knew how to pacify youthful spirits and imaginations. But even as the younger sister, I didn't see a crocodile, and I was sure Mother didn't either. Really, I didn't care what it was. My mind was still wandering from the night before. Amenhotep. Would I ever get to see him again? Sure, Leah was going to go to Luxor as Tutmosis' queen one day, or be presented to him in Memphis as such, or at least a member of the royal harem, which was a grand old living. She could still be the mother of the future pharaoh. It couldn't get any more exciting than to birth from your loins the next generation of the living Horus. I suppose there was a chance I too could go to Luxor, or the palace of Memphis, but I didn't see a reason why. What use would I be? Leah was the queen-to-be, and I was the nobody. I'd probably be stuck in the Delta forever, living a simple life. If I did end up in Luxor or the Memphis Palace, it would likely be as some servant to my sister. Gee, life wouldn't change much, would it? 2 hours of joyful playing, and we began to tire. It was hot after all, and the reflection on the water made us feel as though a burn would be coming shortly. Further into the shallows, Leah and I lay almost completely submerged to bathe us in cool water. The Nile's current tapped and licked at us gently, like a lioness with her cubs. Every tap made a muffle and change in the sounds we heard about us. But the air soon became rather quiet and uneasy. Half asleep, I didn't even notice straight away. My mother screamed, alerting me to wake just as a splash exploded from the water so close to me. A large head had shot like a missile from the water, and in the next moment, it was gone. And so was Leah. I frantically looked around, confused about what had just happened. Leah wasn't on the bank, and she wasn't in the water. Where was she? Behind me, I heard splashing and gurgling. My eyes grew as wide as plates when I saw Leah being spun around and around by a monster of a crocodile. Frightening as it was, my brain did not register what was happening before me, or what I was truly seeing. It was as if I wasn't there at all, but imagining it in safety. But it wasn't even a whole 5 feet away. My mother ran to my father's arms in despair and shock. His words to her, I would never forget them. The words that made me cringe and pull myself from my shock. "What are we going to tell Pharaoh?" He stared helplessly as the beast took the now silent body of my sister back into the water. "Nefertiti, get out of the water!" my mother then shouted. I turned to look at them and hopefully to get to the banks in time. Little was I aware that this crocodile hunted in a pair. It surfaced and seemed to grin out of the water at me. Yes, I was in the shallows, but still deep enough for the water and current to be a nuisance to a fleeing human. A hard step and I fell forward into the water. No! My foot had gotten caught in the mud. I couldn't get free, and the beast of Sobek was coming. My father released my mother and rushed into the water. Mother called after him. Save the baby! Only ankle deep in the water, he seemed so far away and yet so close. I reached out for him, only to have a third bull crocodile dwarfing the other two rise from the water and rush onto the banks, chasing father back onto the marshy grass. It hissed at him and opened his jaws wide. My mother screamed as my father tried to kick the beast in the face, his sandal being pulled off in the process. In the meantime, it felt surreal for me, as if I was having an out-of-body experience. I could feel the jaws of the second crocodile coming upon me and taking hold of me. With one quick turn of his thick head, he freed me from my muddy prison and took me into deeper water as I screamed for someone to save me. My mother's screams began to muffle as I was dragged over and over beneath the water and heard the whisking of the current beneath. I wasn't allowed to surface for long, and after 4 or 5 times, down I was pulled to the bottom, where the Nile turned black. I could no longer hear my mother's screams, and soon The feeling of hungry jaws ceased, and I felt light, lifted, calm, safe. I opened my eyes. It was bright. It was peaceful. I felt a warm, golden support beneath me. It was no longer in the water, but in the clouds. I felt as if I was being cradled in strong, protective arms. The being that held me, I couldn't quite identify it. It was massive and as bright as the sun. I tried to make eye contact with it, which was rather impossible, for it had no face. It was simply a bright disk of golden light, golden arms, at least 6 at a time. From time to time, one arm would vanish and another would sprout, and so would one be added and another removed at will, as in a constant state of renewal. I could almost compare it to a constant movement of a spider on a web. It spoke no words, but a gentle breeze made me feel as if it had whispered to me. I couldn't concentrate on it. I couldn't open my eyes beyond a squint. I could not understand its wordless whispers, and felt lost and empty. It wasn't long before, my life exhausted, I closed my eyes, unsure if I was dreaming or dead. How long was I asleep? How long was I unconscious? To this, I'll never truly know. And if I ever thought back upon it and tried to figure it out, the illogical phenomenon would make it too pointless to try. Did that thing take me somewhere? Somewhere safe? It looked so much from whence I had come that I would have considered it nothing but. However, my feeling of relief and disorientation were about to get a rude awakening as I heard people approaching. It wasn't the people that were strange, for I did not yet see them. My eyes were still sore, and it was hard to focus from all the salt that the Nile had put into my face. I was dry and sticky. The saline from the water had made me feel almost mummified. That would have been horrible. Would then I be in the land of the dead? I certainly wasn't home, for I heard strange voices and names that were so foreign to me. "Bernard! Bernard! Hurry and look at this!"